What's going on, everyone? We are back to break down episode number 3 of Yasawa Island's Season 1 Chaos Games. I'm joined again by my co-host, McKenna Feeney, along with Ravi. Thanks so much for joining us again. Ravi, what did you think of the episode?
I think the season keeps heating up. It seems like every episode you think that's the best episode. So it should be interesting to see where we go from here. But we start off once again with the Happy Tribe, right? You got David ecstatic that, him and his tribe mates didn't get swept and lose every challenge in a row, similar to how we started with Austin in episode 2, how he was all excited about winning in episode 1. So pretty straightforward. And he reiterates that he's aligned with Annie, and then we jump from him to Annie already being a bit suspicious of needing to keep her eye on David, which we might see a little bit of that going forward with Annie's paranoia might finally be starting to come into the game. I don't know if that's the case or not, but I kind of got a sense of that right off the bat of the episode. So yeah, that's started off pretty strong.
So what's your take on David as a player so far?
As a player, he said he wanted to work with Ryan, Phill, and Annie, which Ryan is really good at this game. And I'm curious if he has watched many games that Ryan's played in, because I think he's played in 50 or 60 million games by now, roughly, give or take. It says here he's aligning with Ryan and Phill, but he's also recognizing that Ryan and Phill know each other outside of the game, or play together or whatnot, and he's also scared to go too far, like a Final Four or something like that with them, because then it's him and Annie versus those two, and he's not going to be able to flip one of them. And so obviously he has his eye on the prize, where he's not just thinking, what do I do now? It's also, I want to work with these folks, but I got to keep my eye on them, and here's why. So he seems like he's got strategy, but it's only 3 episodes, so it's hard to really say if somebody, it's one thing to say it and think it, but then he's got to take action. And I guess we'll see we'll see where that goes.
Yep. Yeah, I just think he's so far really great in his confessionals, because he's able to articulate what his gameplay is thus far. And he's good at breaking it down with where other players stand and what type of relationships he knows about.
Yeah, and he's also got the charisma where he's smiling when he gives the answers. He's being lighthearted. He's not being foreboding. Like if you listen to Corey, when Corey talks a lot of times in his confessionals, he gives great information, and the confessionals are entertaining. But when he talks to tribal and things like that, it's almost like an innate fear mongering in a way, where even when he says things that make sense, it sounds scary. Like, uh-oh. For example, we'll hear him at one point in the night talk about a strategy on who should vote with who and why, and how the numbers might break down and things like that. And, later on in the season, and some long range stuff. And it's just scary as a player to hear someone talk like that, where I feel like if David was saying the exact same information, like you would get the point across, but not be shock factor, you know what I mean? So I think that's an advantage for David, where he could probably give somebody some bad news and have them still like him. Whereas if Corey was to give somebody some bad news, it might just sound like bad news. So yeah, like I said, it's only 3 episodes in, so it's hard to say if that read is right or not. And Corey knows what he's doing, but yeah, he's definitely playing very heavy when it comes to the I think foreboding is the word that I use. I think that's appropriate. Yeah.
And I think, Lauren, this might be your personal favorite episode. Am I wrong?
Oh, it's my favorite episode. Just based on everything that we get to see in terms of the breakdown, how people are talking about others. And we'll get to this at Tribal Council. Ryan versus Corey, fantastic television right there. And then also just diving into what people choose to do in terms of the challenge. Are they going to participate? Are they going to go for the clue? Exactly. And then David having to make an ultimate decision on who to give the clue to. There's so much strategy that takes place in this episode.
Yeah. And go ahead, McKenna, sorry.
We have a little bit of insight on the idol clue. So originally, we were expecting more than one person to drop out of that challenge. So we were going to give whoever dropped, we had 2 halves of a clue. So we were just going to give multiple people halves of clues. But since only David dropped, then I had to bring him into a confessional to have him choose who he would want to give the other half of the clue to. And we wanted
Wow.
to encourage cross-tribal communication. So we would, if David and Annie and Nick and Karen both all four dropped, we'd give David and Annie one half of the clue and Nick and Karen the other half of the clue. So it would encourage that cross-tribal communication.
So was that clear? Like, was that clear to David when he was in that confessional? We see a bit, like when I was watching it, I was understanding it that he got a clue. Let me rephrase that. He got the clue, and that he had to give the clue, the same clue, to someone else. Was it like, did I misunderstand that, or was that explained
He only
a
got
little bit?
half.
Yeah, he got half. So what?
Okay, so it's a part of a clue.
I didn't tell him it was only half, because what I did while writing out the clue was like ba ba da ba da ba da dot dot dot, and then Nick half of the clue, because he chose to give it to Nick, started with dot 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 blah blah blah. So
yeah, so
he would just read it all together.
So this really comes down to my question is, when David had to choose, okay, so we get to the merge, okay, so we kind of skipped over that. We get to the merge, and before we go into the immunity challenge, you give everybody the opportunity to hold up a red card or a black card. And I believe it was the black card that David held up, and he was the only one holding the black card. And whoever held up the black card, when they secretly decided, they would get the clue, just like you were mentioning. And we would assume that more than one person would do that. Anybody who doesn't feel confident in individual immunity challenges, you think, would sit out and try their luck.
Well,
with the
what
idol, right?
also
Potentially
a little behind the scenes though as well, and that
Sure.
comes into play at Tribal Council. We didn't announce what the individual immunity challenge was prior to. So I think that's why some people said, I don't know what it is. I'm just going to go ahead and play.
Well, that's a confidence thing, right? Where some people might say, I have no idea what this is. I'm probably screwed. Do you know what I mean? Like if they just don't have confidence in doing a little bit of everything, you know what I mean?
Because I think someone like Annie, who was brought in last minute, she actually used 2 barbecue sauce bottles because, and they were heavier than the water bottles. So we were like, you can compete with these because it's at a disadvantage to you. So like you can,
and
like,
she did really well.
Yeah, she did really well with them. So I could only imagine what she could do with like 2 regular water bottles, but
yeah. So David's the only one that holds up the card. He gets that, and then he has to choose somebody. And it blew my mind when he chose Nick, because you know, as a viewer, when you're watching this, Nick is really aggressive. He does a lot of talking, and at the challenges he's speaking at tribal, whatever, like he's always talking. Now David and Nick have only interacted a little bit, but you'd be able to pick that up even in the challenges, I'm sure. He seems like I don't know if I would want somebody with that amount of charisma in the social game and give them an advantage. But then again, apparently they were already wanting to work together, and you know that must have happened when the original
schoolyard
pick and all that stuff was going on, right?
Happened,
but still, it's so hard. Like, so who would the other options be, right? Carlo and Phill, unless he really wanted to give something to Ryan, which is another example. No, that's the same tribe. Sorry, wrong tribe.
So his options were Karen, Corey,
Austin,
Nick,
and Jeremy.
And Jeremy.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess that's a hard decision to make. I guess if you felt you had a connection with somebody, I guess that kind of makes sense.
Well, and David doesn't have those relationships that all those people do on that other tribe. He doesn't know people prior to coming into the game. So all he has is Annie. So you're just kind of it's almost a crapshoot at that point. If you get an instant connection with someone, you just almost roll with it. It's a gamble at the end of the day, because you don't know what that other person is doing on that particular tribe, and if you can fully trust them to begin with anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's bang on. And obviously the immunity challenge starts, and it starts off with one of the more entertaining portions of the episode with the guy we were just talking about, Nick. Misunderstood apparently the rules. So you had to hold a bottle of water on each hand and hold it extended out. And if your arm dropped, or if you dropped the bottle, you're out, which is kind of a standard type of challenge, right? But Nick, you mentioned in a previous recap, hasn't played a lot of these, if any. So I guess, a little bit of confusion might make sense. And So he intentionally grabs one of his water bottles and tosses it to like a couch or a chair or something beside him, and then focuses on one arm, which if that was the rule, then I think that's awesome.
Oh yeah, it was
It's
a
a good
right?
strategy.
smart strategy.
And once again, it shows that he's thinking, right? Like he's a strategic player, right? He would make moves when he had to. And that it's not easy to be the only one in the challenge to say, I'm going to do this differently. Right. I mean, I can only speak from limited experience. I was in a challenge where you had to hold a gallon of water over your head. And I did it by extending my arms as high up as I possibly could, just to shift where the weight was on my body. And I was the only one that was doing it that extreme. And I looked, a little out of place, you could say, as Nick would have balancing one, but it ended up paying off as, maybe Nick's strategy would have.
Well,
But
McKenna can attest to holding a water jug
I
above
held
her
a
head,
water
too.
jug above my head for 53 minutes.
Yeah, it's
And
insane.
I looked in pain, but I was doing all right. I like held it.
She was crunched.
Oh yeah, see, we couldn't. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, maybe that would work. Yeah, I don't think we were allowed to have it below our head. Like the top of our head was like the.
Yeah. Oh,
Anyway,
it
doesn't
wasn't.
matter.
Well, it wasn't.
Okay.
Just if
We're
it
just
touched
splitting
the
hairs.
top,
You're like,
yeah.
no.
No, we were very.
I feel like this is a contested issue here. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, so, Nick drops out voluntarily, involuntarily, and then you guys edited in the beautiful flashback with the sound effects and everything, which was just, it's what the episode needed.
I had
at that point.
I mean,
right?
it was calling my name, and I was like, let's make this black and white. Let's add a little like flashback music and use the flashback transition.
It reminded me of Wayne's World. Do you ever watch Wayne's World, where they go like doodle doodle doodle? Anyways, it's an old movie, but yeah. So
no, it was pure gold for one reason in particular, with Austin saying, "I'm sure that's a stupid question," and then it just happens.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a stupid question, but it was very clear your answer, and obviously Nick must have been in the middle of setting up and misheard it or whatever. But
that's why you listen.
Accidents happen, right? Like, I've been in challenges before where I forgot to put on shoes, and it was like a weird balance competition and things like, like there's weird things where there's just mistakes that get made in the prep, and that's it. Game over.
I did a plank on carpet with socks. So
yeah, good luck. Yeah, so that was great. And then we see Jeremy ends up winning that challenge, which I put in quotes wins in my notes, just because when you watch it back, I feel like Jeremy might have been a little bit different holding his bottles than, let's say, a Carlo, who was completely extended. Now, that doesn't take anything away from Jeremy, because the way I look at it is, if he starts that way and there's no problem and everybody's okay with it, then that's fine. It's not like he was halfway through the challenge and dropped an elbow. But if you look at it, I think Jeremy's elbows were a little bit more bent, you could say, than everybody else's. I don't want to throw any shade at people, but I looked at it like, if you were going to look at who had their arms out the longest, fully extended, Carlo started that way and stayed that way until he dropped, pretty much. And I was really impressed with Carlo, and because you can't really hear a lot of what he says, and he's not very vocal, but he showed up for the challenge, and I think I honestly, I think he almost won that just based on the elbows dropping and things. But I wasn't there for the rules breakdown, so I'll leave it at that. I don't know. What are you guys' thoughts on that? Were the elbows being a little bit bent, kind of gray area in hindsight?
I think so. Like we weren't as strict, I don't think, with the elbows. I forget what your exact challenge description was, Lauren.
We weren't as strict at the beginning with the elbows, and then notice when we came down to a certain amount of people, I really made sure that the rules we're going fully extended. If arms are not where they should be, we're going to call you out and you'll be eliminated from the challenge. And we have someone such as Ian on production, and he is not afraid to call people out no matter what.
Yeah. And maybe, the reason why I'm kind of leaning towards that is just from, like I said, a viewer perspective. I get a very edited version of this, right? But I get the clip of McKenna giving I think it was McKenna, right? Like, you showed the example of how to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and your arms were just like not locked elbows, but pretty darn close, right? So yeah,
I've
and that's pretty
actually
much
done this challenge too, and
yeah.
I and
I gotta write this down. I gotta start taking
yeah.
notes.
Well, no, I did this challenge because Joe thought he could beat me and I had to show him that he couldn't.
I love
But
it.
so the way I did it was I hold it lower, but my arms are still fully extended, but my back is
Sure.
arched. So
Okay.
it's like it's just kind of, I guess, how you hold it.
Yeah, it's technique. Yeah, yeah. You're bending, but not breaking any rules. It's
Exactly.
perfect.
There's different
Yeah.
strategies that you can utilize.
I love it. Okay. I love it. Like when there's a challenge like this and you're not breaking a rule, but you're interpreting them in a way that's beneficial for you. I totally
Yeah,
support that
that's kind of
100%,
my
which is
challenge style.
right. Which is why I said, I'm not taking it away from Jeremy because he started that way.
Mhm.
And like, if you start that way and you don't get called out, you'd be an idiot to change. Like
Yeah.
why would he all of a sudden go, whoop, right. And just extend out when man, like it's not against the rules if nobody says it is, right? And yeah.
Yeah, and
like I
as
said,
McKenna just showed you, like her arms are still fully extended the way she just had them,
yeah,
but they're just very low. So her
Yeah.
positioning is just different.
sure. And Jeremy can be frustrated, but here's the thing: he was also very proud of his win, and like I said, it doesn't take anything away from that. It was
Yeah.
just a different strategy, right? So on the other hand, you could have had Carlo look at his screen and realize that other people were a little bit more bent, and
Mhm.
actually gone down that way. And if he got called out, then everybody would be getting called out, right? So like he could have
Right.
done the same thing. So it's catch 22 on that. But I mean, Annie did great on that challenge too. Phill did great on that challenge. There was a lot of people that I thought could have won. Phill kind of freaked me out with his elbows.
Hyperextended.
with
Yeah,
that,
I wasn't ready for that when I announced it. I said, okay, I didn't mean that way, but if you're going to go for it, do it. What I will say about Carlo, and we talked about this with Nick a little bit, that was Carlo's very first time participating in any type of org. So,
okay. Yeah.
yeah, this is the first time he's ever playing in anything.
Yeah.
And I'm actually very happy that we got him involved because he seemed to enjoy himself.
Where did you find Carlo?
NSFW, I think. Right?
So Carlo, yeah, NSFW. Mhm.
Yeah, it's a group I'm not yet a part of, yet, but yeah, I accidentally called the guy Carlos with an S in the first recap, and I'll kind of call myself out on making that mistake. But ever since then, I think I've been on.
Yeah,
I've been
yeah,
on.
no, it's Carlo.
Yeah, it's Carlo. Yeah, so I guess after that challenge, we see what we talked about already. David given the clue. We don't see what the clue is, but he's given a clue, and he's informed he has to give that other half to someone, and he decides to give it to Nick. And he also has a little blurb where he's talking about buyer's remorse immediately because he was the only one. And yeah, I think eventually, even if he makes it to the end, that'd be a good question to ask him back on this one was, if you if you had that opportunity again, yeah, is that a mistake, right? To just point yourself out like that by picking that black card. But I don't know. Like I like to do challenges. I'm kind of like Corey, where it's like I want to play. And he, like he said that last episode, I think, and I think I would have gone red too. But man, it's so hard to in a short game like this to pass up on an advantage that can mean everything, especially in a tribal like this where you could have given that idol to the right person. It would make a huge difference in the game, right? So
let's talk a little bit about that Corey Ryan beef, and then we can bring in Nick and ask him all the questions.
I mean, I had to ask 2 tribal council questions and then boom, fireworks, because I asked Ryan one simple question in terms of, does David having a clue to a hidden immunity idol worry you? And he says, no, not really. And then Corey just chimes in there, and basically they just go at it after that.
So that's kind of it's now Corey versus Ryan, and we'll see who winds up on top with that.
Well, and it's interesting too, because I think this is Phil's worst tribal. Nobody really talked directly to Phill much, but when Corey would get attacked, or not Corey, when Corey would attack Ryan, right? When he would say something like, what was it? What was one of the examples where, he goes like, huh, or something, like he kind of like Corey laughs at one of Ryan's answers and is like, well, that's interesting. Phill right away jumps in and is like, well, what was interesting about that? But nobody picks up on it. And then later on, when Annie kind of attacks Ryan again in a weird way, where she says, I want to know what the pecking order is, because Corey and Nick was saying that there's a pecking order that he heard, and Ryan's like, there's no pecking order. And then Annie was like, well, I would really like to know what it is. And I feel like she was being more honest about just saying like, what is this pecking order you're talking about? And Phill jumps in right away, like, yeah. What are you talking about? And really defensive, where typically Phill likes to sit and just kind of fade into the background until someone puts attention on him.
I mean, that's how you play tribal council.
Oh my God.
Still talk and sit until talked to. You don't make
unless you're in danger. Then I would, the opposite of that.
Been there, done that. Let me tell you, definitely have been there. What I will say, where do you think, coming out of this tribal council, who looked better in your opinion, Ryan or Corey, in terms of the arguments that were being made?
I mean, just based on the arguments, I think they both looked horrible. I think Ryan, even though versus Corey, like out of the two of them versus each other, Ryan, I would say, won the argument, but he lost the tribal when it comes to the fact that it is obvious that Ryan is scheming with everybody. And Corey's whole point of the pre-tribal social round, whatever you want to call it, Corey's whole message was, if you give Ryan momentum, he's dangerous, or what, something like that. If you give him momentum, then he'll cause destruction, or some phrase. And then we get to tribal, and the more Ryan talks, the more tribal starts blowing up, and Corey's feeding into that. And now every time Corey talks, once again, he's almost sounding like he's defending himself instead of attacking. Instead of pointing out like, well, Ryan, why were you bringing this up? Why aren't you comfortable with your own people? Why are you coming to me trying to make alliances when you say you're so comfortable and there's no pecking order? Why are you, you know what I mean? Like, instead of attacking back, it was a lot of like, I didn't say that. That's not what I said. Well, of course I would ask that. Like, so Corey was much more defensive, and just by watching someone defend themselves, they look more guilty. But like I said, Ryan, because he was talking so much about all of the conversation and all the strategy that he was working on, all the people that were 50-50 on Ryan now see that, he's playing as hard as Corey said he is. Yeah. Right. And that's a win for Corey, right? In that aspect, where everybody, he can at least feel vindicated, where it's like, look, guys, like, this is what I've been trying to tell you. This guy is working really hard in the background. Right.
Here's my problem though. Corey didn't really have a rebuttal, because
that's true.
He had nothing to go off of. Everything that Ryan was saying, Corey was just wishy-washy with it. If you're indeed saying that wasn't true, make a statement so people can believe you, and then that will in turn have other people stay on your side potentially, because they're like, okay, Corey, I believe him. He is giving a proper statement going back at Ryan. Ryan was just coming at Corey, and Corey didn't have anything to defend himself.
And the easiest way to defend yourself in a scenario like that is to fire right back with something like, why did you do this? Why were you asking me this? Why did you take that meeting? If you're so like, why? Like all these, like the, whataboutisms, right back at Ryan, instead of just even answering. Don't even answer. You don't have to answer the question, right? Like if you, like Lauren, you might poke at it again, like, well, you didn't really answer his question, which is awesome. But, but then again, like I said, in the end, Corey's game isn't really the sit back. Like, let's say Phill did what Corey just did, then that would turn Phil's game upside down, right? Because his style is much more like in the background. Yep. Corey's not really in the background. Corey's talking to everybody anyway. So what he really did was said, I'm out here in the foreground in front of you all, and now Ryan is too. And even though I'm losing this argument, like, it doesn't look like that in the episode, but if I was playing the game, it would really open my eyes to, like, Ryan is trying really hard right now. And the way he can do it by laying back, just being calm. This doesn't even bother me. You haven't even seen me get started yet. Right. That's scary. Right. That's a scary player to have with you. Right. You better have them on your side. So.
Alrighty. I think it's time that we bring Nick in and hear what he's got to say about being a victim of a purple rock.
Oh, I know he has a lot to say. He's going to be bringing the heat for sure with lots of hot takes. What's going on, Nick?
Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, we hear you great. Thanks
Great.
for joining us. We are happy to
course.
have you here. Robbie, I know, has tons of questions for you. I have a couple questions, and then we also have questions from people in the Facebook group. But I know Robbie is going to start us off right now, asking you anything and everything.
Great.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me about yourself. No, I'm kidding. Yeah. Although I will ask a question like that though. Like, have you played in anything like this before? Like, have you played in minis or long games? Any orgs?
No, this is my first any Survivor game experience, whether it's in person or online, long game, short game. Out of any of the formats, this is my first intro, so it's definitely an interesting experience for my first one. But
Well,
I can successfully say that I've never been voted out of Survivor.
yes, it's a good feeling. Welcome
Yeah.
to the club. We we have a lot of these things, a lot of these little communities that go around where we try to get some momentum going. We have minis and orgs and things like that. And this is by far the most active group that I know of. So I'm glad that you joined and played in this game. But did you have a chance to watch any long games or any minis, anything like that? Did you get a chance to view?
He watched
I
like
haven't.
one
I
or
watched
two.
one episode, the
Yeah.
episode where Joe was voted out.
Of season
Okay.
2.
What, Joe was voted out?
Oh, which season?
No, I'm kidding.
Whatever the
Season
first
two.
food is.
It's no spoiler.
Season 2.
Yeah, mine.
Season
Yeah,
2.
Okay,
So-
I wasn't sure because
So Nick is one of my very good friends, and I was like, oh, we're doing a mini, great. Nick loves Survivor. Let's see if I
Come
can
play.
get him to play. And he said yes, and
Yeah, and if that's the case, man, you did fantastic. Like, I gotta say,
Thanks.
it is not easy to jump into one of these things with players who have played multiple times.
Yeah.
And they're not just thinking of this vote, they're thinking of the challenges that are coming, the swaps that might come, the merge, like everything, because they've lived it and they've been bitten by making mistakes and things like that. And I think you did fantastic. I think you were aggressive.
Thanks, Robbie.
I think you made the right alliances. You found people that wanted to work with you. You took charge, and honestly, I was really, really impressed with your game. Knowing you've never played before is why I feel so impressed. I took a couple shots at you about being a little sloppy with your conversations with Karen.
Definitely.
But
It's true though,
But you know what? Like, how would you know if you've never played before?
Yeah.
And it was such a subtle thing that she didn't even pick up on it, right? So, like I said, I think you did fantastic. Are you happy with your aggressive play style? Is that a play style you think that you should have done or that you wanted to do?
Yeah, I think that's my natural tendency. I don't think that is necessarily my best bet early. I think that could help in a later game situation. It's funny because I did have a strategy coming in, and then maybe 30 seconds into the game, it went out the window completely. I told myself that I wanted to play a little bit under the radar. I wanted to just feel things out. I didn't want to be the person making the decisions early, because I know that oftentimes that can backfire a couple of votes down the line. And what did I start off doing? I started off by mounting a full-scale campaign to try and get Dan out. I started talking to everybody on my tribe, sending, the same messages to the people on my tribe verbatim. Maybe not the smartest thing
Did you
to be doing.
paste? Did you copy
Literally
paste?
copy pasted.
People find out.
People talk.
Well,
Okay.
which
People
we
find
saw
out.
with Karen and Dan being like, oh yeah, I got the same
Exactly.
message, don't worry.
I mean, the only message that was customized was to first Jeremy and then eventually Austin, because those were the people who I truly wanted to work with. Everybody else was just like, here you go, don't vote me out,
Yeah, and that's a question that I had for you was, you attacked Dan. I guess it's kind of a twofold question. You attacked Dan pretty hard. Was it because Dan was Dan, or was it because he wasn't Austin and Jeremy? Like, was it as simple as that?
Yeah, I think Dan, I've had time post game to talk with Dan just very briefly. I think Dan seems lovely from the interactions I've gotten with him. It's funny, I messaged Dan after I was voted out or not voted out and said, man, should have worked with you. It was more because he was not Jeremy and Austin, and Dan was not my first or my second choice to go home that day. But after those choices were ruled out by other people who I was working with, I just knew I didn't want it to be me or my alliance. And so that's who was available to go.
So did
Can
you
you talk about those choices?
Yeah, I wanted Karen out. I thought that Karen was extremely dangerous and thought that she could do very well in the game if given the opportunity to do so. And I just didn't ever want her to be able to get that opportunity, to be able to get her feet up off the ground, sort of a thing. And it was expressed to me by, I think, one or two different people, certainly by Corey. And I think Austin maybe brought it up as well, that maybe that wasn't the best first vote. And I knew Corey wouldn't vote for her. And I just thought it would be easier to maybe keep that first vote easy, right? Keep some tribal unity, that sort of a thing. And then I also wanted Corey out because Corey never states what he's thinking. He always asks what other people are thinking. It's a really smart move. But if you can never get a read on somebody and what they actually think about a situation, it's not necessarily somebody I want to work with. But people didn't want to vote out Corey either. So if I'm working with Jeremy and Austin and people don't want to vote these two people out, Dan is just the easy last option on a tribe of, 6 people.
Yeah, and that's kind of the pitch that you gave to Karen, I think, in that episode. Yeah, it was pretty cut and dry, kind of straightforward.
And it does keep a tribe strong to not have to, the other tribe's argument against us was that we were divided at tribal council on our first one, which we saw wasn't true. We saw that they ended up being wrong,
I'll give a little insight to all this and Carlo's big argument. So we were having some difficulty navigating with the Zoom and people being like exiting the Zoom completely and needing to be brought back the whole 9 yards. And that was all during Nick's tribal council, the first time, the TOA tribal council. Also, so that made it stretch out a little longer. And then what you actually point out in tribal council, which I love that you said, was just because Lauren is asking us more questions doesn't mean that we're a fractured tribe. It's just Lauren decided she had more questions for us. Keaton was a very straightforward vote out, while they had a little bit more of a conversation. Also, they had that janky wheel spin at the challenge to decide who sat out. But
well, that, and also you had the whole Dan situation come up. He was trying to save himself. That also takes a bit longer. But
I mean, when you have a fight at tribal council, that's also going to add time. And I don't think it was just Carlo. I think other people did bring that up, and I just thought, it just seemed like such a weak argument. And in fact, I think it did bolster us as a tribe. Whether or not they're right or wrong is somewhat irrelevant, but it did bolster us as a tribe, I think, to be so united on that front, on that first vote. Because if we had continued to win and not have a situation where we would have had to go to, another or multiple tribal councils down the line, then obviously you can get into a merge or a post-merge situation where the numbers are on your side. So that was my thinking on the Dan vote, Robbie.
Yeah. and Ryan played a big part in this episode as well. And one of the things that Ryan had mentioned was that he was a little nervous about you, Austin, and David, which was interesting for a lot of reasons. But one of them is Jeremy wasn't included in that, which was a testament to Jeremy's game in a way.
I agree.
At that point,
Jeremy was working those both sides of Corey and Karen and Nick and Austin, and he was right in the middle and could choose wherever he wanted to go.
So my question there was, we see a lot of people are being asked to flip, and Ryan mentions he doesn't care about the old tribes. He's got his new 5 or new 6 that he's working on or whatever, some phrase like that, right? So did Ryan ever approach you, or was it just dead silence from Ryan and you knew you were kind of in danger a little bit, you and your trio?
Yeah, Ryan is interesting because Ryan and I had a very brief conversation in a breakout room that essentially amounted to, what are you thinking?
So
what are you thinking? Just literally both asked a question and didn't give or offer a lot of information because, he's a savvy guy. We both know better. I think that there is an opportunity maybe to have fed the opposing tribe some opposing information that could have been helpful from our end if we had decided as a 5-sum to leak two different names, neither of which we had been voting for. I think that might have been an interesting decision. And then, maybe a David goes back and says, I heard they're voting for Annie, and a Ryan goes back and said, oh, I heard they're voting for Carlo, and maybe we're voting for Phill. Yeah, no, I don't think Ryan and I were able to. I think Ryan and I probably could work well together if the opportunity would ever present, or if things had worked out differently in this game, but we just never were able to get on the same page. But like you said, Robbie, I think that's great for Jeremy's game, that he essentially goes undetected in this not majority alliance of 6, but if we lose one person and we have 5, and it is me, Jeremy, and Austin solidified, and Jeremy's not playing the middle, as McKenna said, then it is a majority alliance within that 5,
Yeah, and you can also take it as a compliment when Ryan was in a breakout room with just you, and he didn't give you a bunch of information. A lot of times when players who have a lot of experience, like Ryan does, if they're in a room with someone that they feel they can kind of pull the wool over their eyes a bit, they'll feed them everything. Like, hey, I want to work with you. Let's do this. Let's do that. Yada, yada. And they think you're going to believe it. And then they'll leave and tell all their friends and allies and be like, hey, here's what this guy thinks right now. How can we use that? Yeah. But if you're in a room with someone who you think is just going to call you out on it, and you can't necessarily,
which I ended up doing at Tribal Council, as we saw.
Then you don't do that. Right. So it's kind of a crappy compliment to get. Like, it's saying the guy doesn't want to work with you, but he thinks you're a good player.
I mean, I will go back also to what you said. I think his whole speech about my new 5 is baloney. I just think that's malarkey. I mean, come on, man. You've got to know better than that.
I feel like he was playing Karen maybe a little bit. They do have a bit of a history, and I could see him trying to approach Karen, but I guess you're probably not privy to that, because obviously he wouldn't be in the breakout rooms with just the 2 of them, because then it wouldn't be just the 2 of them. But another similar question I had for you about kind of a perception-based thing. Jeremy's relatively well hidden, like we mentioned, but at this point, I haven't seen a lot of conversation about anyone being afraid of David and Annie. Are they pretty well insulated right now, or did you guys kind of have your suspicions that they might know each other?
I wasn't terribly aware of it at the time. I was made aware of it at a later point, but I wanted to work with David, and I tried to bring that across in that schoolyard pick, and maybe it did get across, because as we saw, he ended up choosing me for the clue that McKenna gave him.
Get to after finish your thought.
So, and then that goes back to what you said, Robbie, about Ryan calling us out as an alliance, which was never a discussion solidified. It was floated when David was the person we had identified as a 5 that perhaps would be most willing to flip, or maybe as a 4, I should say, because I think Corey really tried to work on flipping Phill from the conversations I was made privy to that I was not a part of. People had filled me in on some behind the scenes things that as they were taking place in Zoom chat and that sort of a thing. And so I think it would have been an interesting dynamic if we had brought in David especially. I would have felt a little more comfortable with, especially after the idol clue situation, if we had done a 4 boys alliance of myself, David, Jeremy, and Austin. I would have been willing to work the same sort of format with Phill up to a point, but I did think that was interesting when that got brought up in Tribal, because I thought to myself, well, maybe that means that we've gotten in Ryan's head successfully, since that is not actually the truth. Maybe we've been able to scare Ryan enough that he thinks that is the truth, when it in fact is just an opportunity for us to try and survive this as a 5-sum, this vote.
Yeah, and that's where the whole Annie and David thing comes in, because if you would look at Annie and David as a duo, right, which we don't really know 100% yet. If they are, it seems that way, at least so far, that they're working together. But if you would have assumed that at that point, if there was a leak or someone gave it away somehow, then like if David was like, you know what, I think Annie will work with us because of XYZ, or if Annie did the same thing, like I think we're good, whatever, then that would change your plans with that, right? Like every time you're thinking about bringing David in, you'd be questioning, okay, well, is this going back to Annie, and then in turn going back to whoever Annie's working with? And maybe.
Maybe. I mean, I do think that there's an an interesting situation if you paint in some universe that Phill, Carlo, and Ryan are like the three masterminds of that, and say like, oh, come with us and we can offer you safe haven, which I don't think anyone's going to buy into. But yeah, you're right. And maybe Corey has the better idea to end up trying to flip Phil's vote, rather than going after someone who is, as you mentioned, Robbie, if he is already part of a duo that is sort of more locked in.
Yeah, and you mentioned about trying to flip votes, and we see in the first vote that Annie votes Austin, right?
Mhm.
And we see in the second vote that David votes Austin, but we don't see vice versa. Like we don't see their votes in the the reverse rounds or whatever.
Well, we did
but
hear David say, "I'm sticking with my vote."
Exactly.
Still going. So we can assume.
Yeah, I'm not flipping. He says, "I'm not flipping." I think he's
Right.
yeah. So I mean, you can assume that they're voting as a block or whatever you want to call it. I hate that term, but they're voting as
a voting cluster.
A voting cluster.
Trust cluster,
the
whatever
trust
you want to
cluster.
call it.
Yeah. But you don't see anything about Carlo,
Mm-mm.
right? Like you don't see
a wild card in my mind if there ever was one.
Yeah, which is
never had a read on him.
I would love to be able to play Carlo's game.
Yeah.
Where you're kind of like in the background, like to the extreme, it seems like. And when people are trying to think of who they're going to attack, he's the last one they think of because he's the last, like, you know what I mean? He's the person who speaks to them the least, right? Like he's just kind of, oh yeah, Carlo will vote with us. So I don't know if I could ever play that. It's similar to a Phill game, right? I just couldn't play a Phill game, but we do see, like I said, Phill standing up for Ryan and Tribal a whole bunch, which would have made me nervous if I was in your shoes when it came to the revote and trying to hope that Phill might flip because of the fact that every time Ryan got attacked, Phill was jumping in there and defending.
Yeah.
Right. But the question that it really comes down to is, for everybody, when you have to do your revote, are you willing to risk your game for Austin? And are they willing to risk their games for Ryan?
Yeah. I think
that's a hard question to answer sometimes.
So I think for me, Robbie, you asked me earlier about my play style. And for me, I try and make my play style as logical as possible, which I think could end up being a deficit in a potential long game or jury situation if I were to ever make it to a final, because it's almost like something akin to a Spencer Bledsoe first outing performance in Survivor, where it's just like chess pieces. So when we were going up towards, we all had talked about the idea of rocks before Lauren asked that question in Tribal Council, which clearly, there were liars from that answer. Everybody had talked about it.
You still have to ask it. I still have to ask it.
Of course you do. Of course you do. And everybody had talked about it as groups. People had talked about it as, one-on-ones, small groups, big tribes, merges, that sort of thing.
You asked Karen, you were in that conversation with Karen, and she's like, I'm not willing to go to rocks.
And there were countless other conversations over that. And for me, it just boiled down to, Robbie, statistically, all emotion aside, the advantage is ours. The advantage is Toa-Toa's because our person, one of our people, Jeremy, has immunity. So just off of that, it's a 3-4.
Yep.
And you go with the math. You always follow the math. I'm a big fan of professional sports, the NFL in particular. And you see these scenarios in the NFL where it's one play and it's all you've got. And if you can get a down or something like that on this play, then you're probably going to win the game. And you always go with the math. And so for me, it was just like, this should be so simple, right? Like we shouldn't even have to have a discussion. Why would you not want to go to rocks when if you simulate this game 1,000 times, one of us is not only going to survive, but we're probably going to win the game.
Yeah.
One of the Toa members, a majority of those 1,000 votes or 1,000 simulations. But of course, people don't actually play like that because we're not playing this many 1,000 times. We're playing it once,
Yeah, exactly. And
so
you're talking the math and they're talking, like I said, am I going to risk my game even if it's 100-1 for Austin? Or am I going to risk my game even if it's 100-1 for Ryan?
Yeah.
Right. And some
clearly we
people, it will
saw.
be like the Sandra game, right? It'll be no.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I don't care what the math is. I'm not risking my game for yours. See ya.
But did you
And-
ever think that two people would in turn flip? Because essentially what you see
I was really
Karen's
worried
vote-
about Karen, and nothing against Karen. I can't blame Karen for going home, even if I'm mad at her decision to flip. But I hate to be this guy, Robbie and Lauren, but like I was right? Because like if you never flinch, if you just, even if you're bluffing, as long as you don't flinch, you're probably usually going to have somebody else flinch. So if you can just present this wall, even if it's a lie, of unity, and you know what? Let's just do it. We don't care. Let's, pull out the metaphorical rock bag now. Just put up the wheel now. Let's just avoid tribal council. Spin the wheel. We'll go home. We don't care. Somebody's usually going to fold. And we saw that. And we saw that one of their members, whoever it was, for my best guess, I would have to say it wouldn't be, I don't think it would be David or Ryan or Andy.
It'd have to be
Carlo or Phill.
Carlo
or Phill is my best guess, right? Somebody gets scared. And so, Karen gets scared too. And then I get screwed over. And like I said, I can't blame Karen, but the logic or the math does work out, where
and
it would have been a different story if she had stayed.
Right. If she didn't flip, then you guys would have been going strong, wouldn't have had to go to rocks. If you guys just all stuck to your guns, then
and then there's a possibility of a pagonging, which would have been great.
And something that's really funny about it is, and I've mentioned this in a previous recap, is that of all the people in the game, minus Corey, of all the people in the game, Austin's the one that's come out openly saying, I don't want Karen to go this early in the game because she's been crushed so many times in other games for unfair reasons that I don't want to burn her so early, right?
And that's so interesting to me because, as you mentioned, Robbie, I've never seen any of these other games, so it's like I don't give a fuck about that. Let's just play this game.
Which is fair. But what
I
I'm
don't
getting
know
at
her.
is Karen has somebody in the game who and she wasn't in the room, right? So she doesn't know this, and that's totally fair. So her actions, knowing that are her actions. But she has someone in the game who says, I don't want Karen to go home. And then an hour later, roughly, right? Because you guys are playing a mini. Like a lot of times when you're watching this, you forget this wasn't 2 days later like it is for the viewers, or 3 days over the weekend later. This is an hour later or 45 minutes later or something like that. Roughly. Am I ballparking it pretty close?
Yeah. The water bottle challenge took a little bit longer, but
Sure.
Hour and a half. Hour and a half.
So it's not days, right?
Yeah.
So literally an hour ago, whatever, hour and a half, you got a guy saying, I don't want her to go home. I don't want her to go home. And then an hour later, she asks herself, am I willing to risk my game for Austin? Nope.
Yeah. and like you said, she's not privy to that.
Like, man, like, and she, right decision, wrong decision. There's no telling at this point, right? Because maybe,
who knows,
and here's the funny thing. So now you go back, it's over, right? Vote's gone. Nick, you've left the Zoom, or you've left the room into a breakout room, presumably.
Yeah.
And everyone, I'm guessing Corey, if I was to make a guess, Corey's going to be like, who did it? Who flipped? Or no one flipped? Did you all vote? Like just grilling people. Who'd you vote for? Who'd you vote for? Who'd you vote for? Mm-hmm. And Jeremy and Austin right away are going to say, Austin's going to say, I couldn't vote, right? Because Austin couldn't vote. Jeremy's going to say, I voted Ryan.
Immune. Why not go to Rob?
I assume, Robbie, that she would not reveal that she flipped. I would assume that whoever flipped from the other tribe and her would both just answer those questions with, it was a 5-5. It is what it appears to be.
And this is what I'm getting at, right? This is where it's going to be really interesting, because whoever the flipper is, Carlo or Phill, right? Because we're assuming that Annie and David are working together, and we saw one of the votes. So if it's Carlo or Phill and they flipped and Karen changed their vote, which maybe they didn't, right? Maybe Karen voted Austin both times, and maybe Phill or Carlo voted Ryan both times, because we don't see Phill or Carlo's either of the votes. Whoever it is has to go back to the one that stayed, or to their original tribe, and say, I voted the way you said.
Yeah.
And whose lie is going to break first? Right?
Yeah, I'm interested to see if it ever comes out, because there's a scenario in which it never has to.
And that's true. And like, let's say Corey because Corey was working Phill, real hard,
Mhm.
right? Like he was in private breakout rooms, and then David came in and stuff like that. If Phill flipped, and then Corey goes back to Phill and was like, dude, you were with us, right? Like, why didn't, or you didn't flip? Why didn't you flip? And now he's pissed at Phill for not flipping. And if Phill opens up and is like, dude, I did, right? If that's the case, well, then now Corey's like, well,
Maybe this breaks down
I trust,
trust,
right? And he
Yeah.
trusts Karen, and he's fighting for Karen. So Karen had Corey and Austin fighting for her, and then in turn, kind of, burn them in a way. But like I said, maybe she's got a really good alliance with Ryan, because I could see Ryan going to Karen and saying, listen, because we've played against each other before and I burned you, nobody would expect us to work together. So let's make a secret alliance.
Does that work though?
Right?
Almost never, but the unity, I will say the unity ticket is certainly an appealing idea, right?
He's burned her at, I think off the top of my head, definitely 2 times for sure.
Right. But even there is an even stronger reason why nobody would expect.
Listen,
you know what I mean? Like,
and listen, there's strength to a unity ticket, whether it's Survivor or in politics. Can you imagine a Democrat and a Republican in American politics being either the president and vice president or flip it, right, respectively, whichever one is in whichever slot? They would be able to get so much done.
Well done, Nick. Well done.
In American politics. So if you translate that to the game of Survivor, and you have 2 opposing members, if they are indeed loyal to each other before they're loyal to their tribes, which is the problem, right? If they can actually both, it's like that old, do you remember that old game show, Robbie, Friend or Foe, back in the 90s? No,
no,
to me,
you
it's
got
like
the
that.
right
If they
time
can
era
both,
or whatever, but no.
If they can both choose, for those of you who have never seen that game show, you should definitely YouTube it. If they can both choose to actually stay loyal to each other, then in fact, they'll probably be able to run the table. The problem is one person's probably going to be able to say, well, if I exploit this relationship for my betterment and they don't, then I'm going to be able to run the table. But the problem is if they both exploit the relationship at the expense of the other, then it blows up in both of their faces.
Yeah.
It's a tricky game to play.
I think episode 4 is going to be amazing. I can't wait to see it, because the fact that the aftermath of you going home in such a crappy way, and you know what, just a little tidbit. I don't know if I'm assuming you've watched episode 3. I don't know if there's
I've watched them all, and I'm interested to see what happens, because I don't know the boot order or anything like that. So I'm interested to see, because Robbie, my assumption now is that it will be a Pagani.
Yeah.
My assumption is 1, 2, 3, 4. There goes Toa Toa. Yeah.
And the funny thing is too, is when hey, it's not really funny for you, I apologize, but hilarious for us. When you get rocked out, the only people, or the first people to talk, are all the people who just won.
Interesting.
Like Karen.
You mean the
here is David going, whoa.
Yeah. So Karen,
I saw that and thought that was interesting.
So Karen right away was like, oh, I you know what? I wrote it down here. What does she say?
She said something about if there's a way to go out.
Yeah, that's it. She goes, well, I guess if there was a way to go out, you never got voted out. Like
thanks, Karen.
Right, bang. And David, David was the very first one.
David was very, I remember that.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Nick. Huge smile on his face. Nick, I'm so sorry. Inside, he's like, yes.
And then Phill was also one of the little boxes there on the side, and he was just like, oh my God, because it was either Phill or Nick.
Well, it was almost him. So that
so
makes
you saw Phill like, oh my God.
Thinking he's going home.
God. Yeah.
Such an interesting idea to think how much the game changes from one tiny blip of a
to be
wheel,
fair though, that wheel's already been used too much in this season. So
that's on us.
Listen, it's kind of poetic justice. Okay, it's kind of poetic justice.
I still stand by our decision. I don't think that was a bad decision, Lauren. I still stand by our decision.
I still called it out, but I do want to get to a couple questions from the Facebook group.
Let's do it.
I'm having too much fun here.
I know this is great. Let's do it though.
I think I looked at 1 or 2 of them. I think there's one that I won't answer, but I'll save it until you ask it.
All right. So Chris Klein wants to know, after you had time to think about it, how do you feel now to go out on rocks? If/when you play again, would you be willing to go rocks again? Which you kind of already answered this.
You always go for the rocks. If I were to play this game 100 times, every single time I'd choose to go rocks. I feel okay about it. I think it is, whatever Karen's true.
Like that's prefaced with if you had the numbers, right?
If I have the numbers if I have the You mean by that Jeremy has
Mathematically.
immunity?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
If we
say
have the
Brian-
numbers and one of our people has immunity, always.
Yeah.
See, this is interesting. From their perspective, this is why I think Phill or Carlo ended up flipping, because they didn't have immunity. This is what we talked about of
Mhm.
if you just bluff well enough, they're going to flinch because they don't have it.
Right.
I don't know my answer. And by not knowing that answer, we can assume like maybe not, that I wouldn't always go to rocks if I didn't have the numbers. I feel okay about going out on rocks, regardless of Kieran's intention when she made that comment in the game. I agree with her. I think it's an interesting thing to be able to say I've never been voted out of a Survivor game, and saves me a little bit of pain and suffering in the moment of, like, on the day of, it was a little bit easier to be like, all right, I didn't get voted out strategically. Like, no one ever hatched a plan. I knew those plans were brewing, in the background. But yeah, I think she's right. I think that is probably the way to go out.
I can't attack you because, like I said earlier, I said welcome to the club, because when I played in the long game, the only long org that I played, it was the same deal. I didn't get a single vote against me the entire time.
Nick got one.
And then, fair. But
Yeah.
then I went out in a challenge that was me versus somebody and booted me out, like a fire making challenge, right? So it's the same deal where it wasn't like I didn't get voted out by a bunch of people or anything.
Yeah.
So
Well, and I think it was Adam
mistake.
Klein. I think it was Adam Klein at Winners at War when asked, "What is it
mistake?
going to take for you to win this game?" And he said, "A lot of luck." That's what Survivor is. Survivor is, in my estimation, maybe 60-70% strategy and 30-40% luck. And listen, by no means is that a small percentage. So yeah, I feel okay about it.
Well, you had Annie on one side and Phill on the other on the circle. So
Oh yeah.
if it just would have a little quicker, a little slower. Yeah.
Were the McKenna, I assume the circle slots were every other tribe now that he's mentioned that?
No, just
But
put
I
put
just
the
typed
names
the
in.
names.
Completely random.
Yeah.
Completely random. You just type in the names.
So
Love it.
what happened was, like, I typed in from the schoolyard pick and then just deleted who got voted out.
Voted out before the wheel.
Right.
Interesting.
Like
Good to know.
Pseudo random.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like really was like nothing.
I mean, a wheel in itself is random, so it doesn't really matter. But
names completely typed in and it had nothing to do with tribes.
Interesting.
All right.
That was a good question.
Josh Blake wants to know, I love the energy you brought to the game. Were you thinking you were able to pull someone over before the vote to axe Ryan, or did you know Rocks was the only shot by the time Tribal started?
I thought I had a legitimate shot at turning David. I was wrong. I thought from the conversations we had with him in breakout rooms with our alliance that he felt fairly uncomfortable under Ryan's thumb, which I think was true. He just wasn't willing to flip and put himself in a worse scenario for it, which, there's no denying that he would have been in a worse scenario under our thumb. So, yeah.
All right, Alex Trias wants to know, was it fitting for a wheel to decide someone on your tribe's fate after you guys made the host use it the first 2 rounds to make decisions for your group?
I am not going to dignify that question with a response.
I just want to say, Alex, I love your question. Being the person who spun the wheel all 3 times.
I adore Alex Trias. I'm just not going to answer his question.
No, I think the next question I have is my favorite question, though. From Ian.
Oh, I haven't seen this one.
Oh, I don't think I'm going to answer this one either. I think I know this one.
You need to answer this one. Do you feel that getting wheeled out was the direct consequence of trying to beat the system in the immunity challenge?
No. There's no system trying to be beaten.
Well, I watched the episode and I could clearly hear Lauren say you could drop one and just hold on to the other one.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's no argument over whether or not the rules were adequately explained. And I was talking to a friend about this of the edit provides. We hear this conversation a lot on Survivor of like, oh, the edit made me look this way or the edit made me look that way. If I was that guy, I would say now.
You're talking to me about that.
Yeah, I would say, oh, the edit made me look like a fool in this episode. The edit didn't do that. I just was a fool by not listening and not actually comprehending rules that were, in fact, clearly and not just briefly explained, but explained over a long couple of seconds. It wasn't just a quick You have to have them both. Bye. Right? There were questions asked about it. There were answers provided. We went over it 2 or 3 times where it wasn't shown in the episode. You know, the edit can only do so much. If you never say certain things or act in a certain way, like it can't portray you in those ways. It can only do what you give it to do. So
Yeah, but you got to give yourself credit though too, man, because
maybe. But
the rewind, the flashback sequence is amazing. So
I mean, it's hard. You have to focus at all times because there's directions everywhere and you have to be paying attention. You're also paying attention. Is there a clue to something that I'm looking for while the challenge is being explained? There's so many different elements that come into play.
Yeah. And you, like I was gonna say, you got to take credit because you were pissed, right?
Oh, yeah.
When that happened, but
mad.
right. And like you said, okay, you know, you're being a fool or whatever unintentionally, that's fine. But then, you know, 5 minutes later or whatever it was, you just took it all in stride. You know, you were easygoing about it. You weren't sitting there all bitter. You were asked a question and you said, yeah, I wish I would have listened to the rules better. You weren't like, I wish Lauren and McKenna would have told me.
I mean,
what,
you know, that sort of energy is not going to
light
benefit you in the game to
and that's,
get all serious about it.
A lot of people can't do that though. A lot of people would be bitter until it was over and then go back and whine about it. And you just let it roll off your back.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't laugh at yourself, then like who else can you laugh at? I like laughing at other people, so I have to laugh at myself, right?
Yeah, and I don't want any spoilers here because I don't know any yet. Like
I don't know much
because I'm terrified that we're accidentally going to give something away. Because
I know a little bit.
No, McKenna would have been great. We have given absolutely nothing.
A comment. It's not a question. It's a comment. But something that I really loved in this episode, and I don't know if it was just an accident or not, was right before we went to cast the votes. It wasn't after the votes. It was right before we went to cast the votes. Lauren goes something like, does anybody else have anything else they want to say? And there was like this huge pause. And it's almost like somebody had, they probably don't, but I love reading into stuff that's not there. It's almost like somebody has an advantage for like an extra vote or something weird, like a steal a vote where they have to be like, I'm taking your vote or something. And it was like this massive pause. And based on all the drama that we just watched with Corey and Ryan, I was
that
like, oh,
fight,
man,
Robbie, I'm sure you guys covered that. That fight was so exhausting. As somebody in the game, I can't tell you that experience of sitting there and being like,
to touch on was your part in the fight of you made a bunch of BS up.
Lies. You know, there was that moment, Robbie, if you remember, where Ryan asked Lauren, Robbie, can we show screenshots in this game? And for the 2.5 seconds before Lauren answered no, my whole world started imploding. Just like I started seeing spots, I started sweating profusely, and then she said no, and everything, like the ocean waves just calmed down. And I took
I said the no very nicely. The no was very direct.
Oh no, I know that, but I took a big sigh of relief. I'm saying that's how I was feeling after you said no. Like everything had come to a standstill because I was like, oh, great. Because in fact, of course I was lying. He had never said any of that. I wrote that
down as a big play for Ryan, because like I think Ryan knew you weren't allowed to show screenshots because that's typically a standard rule in these games.
But you're not going to ask unless you're sure that you're going to win the argument, right?
No, that's the opposite. So Ryan knows that conversation like probably doesn't exist. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But he wants to show that it does. So even though he knows, because if Lauren was to say yes, then it's kind of
somebody's got to show a receipt.
Catch 22, right?
Yeah.
So by Ryan being like, are we allowed to show screenshots? Because I got my conversations right here. I can send you like, and he doesn't want to send his conversations out either, right? There's no way Ryan wants to share what he's telling people. So he knows the no's coming, but it makes it sound like he knows the truth.
Oh yeah, no, I'm agreeing with you. I think that benefits him because it assumes that he is the one willing to go to receipts. Yeah. Which is true. I was not. My receipts were full of shit.
So. And he knows that's the answer, but I'm assuming he knew that. I don't know.
Yeah,
I could be crazy.
Yeah, that fight was stressful. That fight was annoying to be a part of in general. You know,
just a lot. You know.
Yeah.
But Robbie, Nick, McKenna, any other questions or anything else you want to talk about?
One thing I gotta say. Mr. Nick, you got the other half of the idol clue.
I'm
to
interested.
explain?
No, I'm interested to see if it'll be brought up in the next episode. I have no comment. I would like to know if I can submit a winner pick based on not knowing a lot. I think that David has the potential to win this game. I would like one of my original alliance of 3, Jeremy or Austin. That'd be cool. But I think David has enough.
Did get the idol because we saw it in his vote confessional.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
I think
would just
he's well placed.
Yeah, I would just like since he only got half of the clue and you got the other half, how he got the.
Is it going to be shown in the episode next?
You can say it. You can say it.
I don't want to say it.
So
do you want me to say it for you then?
No, I think we should wait until episode 4. Leave the viewers hanging.
did you guys ask each other like, hey, did you get a clue? And then you told him what yours was, and he was like, yeah, I got the same one, and then didn't
Definitely
share?
not. No, that's definitely not what happened.
Because I feel like that's a vet move against a new guy move.
It's exactly what happened, Robert.
Oh,
Yeah.
God dang it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Because you know what it
well
was?
played,
And
David,
it's
yeah.
interesting because as soon as I shared my half with him, at literally the moment I hit the return button to send the message,
Yeah.
it doesn't, I'm not exaggerating because I'm one to exaggerate. The moment I hit send, I realized what had happened.
Yeah.
It was a split-second light bulb, like, the fuck did you just do that?
And you didn't change it at all, did you? You said like, because it was
Oh,
probably
no.
like a numbers
Copy,
or words or
paste.
letters or yeah.
Exactly as the
You
host
could
had
have
sent it to me.
modified the heck out of that and sent
Just-
it.
Yeah, it's a
Total
that was a
idiot.
smart game move by David. You
Great
gotta give him
move.
credit there.
And
He knows what's
you know,
going
I
on.
was so caught up. The other thing that was happening in the moment, Robbie, is we were in the middle of that madness of pre-tribal, you know, happening. And I think tribal might have already started. I mean, it was bananas. And I had, you know, half a dozen conversations happening at once, whether it was over some sort of chat or over a breakout room with different people. And I just thought like, yeah, let me fire this off real quick. And then I'll return to my conversation with you. And I looked down and I fired it off and I looked up and I thought,
Oh crap.
fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think David is in a really strong position to maybe maneuver through. If it's not, well, if it is a Pagonging, I think David's in a strong position. If it's not a Pagonging, I think David's in a strong position to, if it's not a Pagonging and things get muddied, not just because he has an idol and not just because he has a maybe an unconfirmed, you know, sort of final 2 with Annie. I just think that David has a lot of strategic whereabouts without showing all his cards. Like I made the mistake of doing one too many times.
Well,
That's
we're
my
gonna
pick.
see what happens.
Yeah.
And we got many more episodes to go, but thanks so much, Nick, for joining us tonight.
Thank you guys.
Robbie, thank you as always for coming on with McKenna and myself. Episode number 4 of Yasawa Islands will be dropping tomorrow night, Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. And then sometime on Thursday night, we will be talking to the next eliminated player. So be sure to look out for that. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. And let us know what you think. And definitely keep rooting for your favorites.
Go Toa Toa.